Welcome, everyone. We have a terrific panel to talk about leadership in the age of AI, a very diverse group of people. Pablos, who is a renowned hacker and is working with people like Bill Gates and Nathan Myhrvold on innovations that impact the world. Thomas, who has worked on digital transformation at big corporations across a variety of sectors in geographies all over the world. And Amy Wilkinson, who has a very diverse background, working in banking and at the White House, and teaches at Stanford and helps companies, advise companies on digital transformation. So I'd like to start out with you, Pablos. How do we change the frame from one very negative dystopian world where AI is running amok and stealing our jobs to one that is positive, encouraging, and inspirational?
Well, I think about this a lot because I'm really excited about the future. And what you see over and over again is like AI is cast as the new villain, the new boogeyman in everybody's vision for the future. And yeah, you know, Hollywood needs a bad guy, but at some point I think it's irresponsible to just show these dystopian stories. You know, we should boycott dystopia. It's not gonna be great. And we have to like deliberately build a different future. And so I think a lot on longer time scales. And when you look on a longer time horizon, we're doing pretty well. You know, the world, by almost any objective measure, is better than it's ever been historically. There's really no reason to think it's not going to get better. So when I look at something like a population growth curve, you know, we go from like millions of humans to billions almost overnight. You know, another way to read that is we went from like millions of jobs to billions of jobs in the last couple hundred years. So we can probably make a few more. And the way I think about it, you know, there's a lot of important work that robots can't do, that AI can't do. A robot can only do what we teach it how to do. And right now, we are terrible role models for robots. So when you look at, and I come, you know, from the front lines of inventing new technology, and what I think we're kind of disingenuous about sometimes, where I come from in Silicon Valley, is we act like we're going to solve every problem in the world, and we're not. We're not even trying. When you look at the kinds of problems that exist in the world, you know, I kind of classify them in two categories. You've got quantity of life problems, which is, you know, we can keep you alive longer, we can give you a healthier life, we can keep more people alive, those kinds of things. But when you look at the needs that humans have, you know, only like the bottom half of Maslow's hierarchy is being addressed by technology, right? Physical needs, health, safety, those things. The whole top half, sense of purpose in life, having a community, exercising creativity, these are not things that apps are helping you with, that technology is helping you with. We don't even have ideas about that stuff. And so I think the real thing to understand is that there's a lot of work to do. When a robot takes your job, rejoice and get on with the really important work of doing what only humans can do, which is figure out how to take care of humans, right? You look around you, people are still hurting. How do you take care of the inner life of a human? How do you solve for the psychological well-being of a human? AI isn't going to do that. I'm not saying it never will, but we're not even close. We don't even have ideas about that. Humans have to do that. And so I think about that a lot because I think there's a lot of exciting and important things to do. And, you know, we're just distracted.
Okay, so let's buy into this wonderful world where we have this opportunity to do exciting things, right? but change is hard. People are scared of change. So, Amy, you wrote a book about the creators, about creators and how they think. So how do we apply entrepreneurial intelligence to the introduction of artificial intelligence?
So I think that artificial intelligence is a tool, and that entrepreneurial intelligence is available to every single person. It's a fundamental human ability. We can teach it, we can coach it, we can learn to be more entrepreneurial. And in a new world of work and looking forward to the future of leadership, asking the right questions is a really important thing to do. Humans really are good at that. We can probe, we can ask questions, we can negotiate. You don't see AI negotiating. We can understand the social dynamics in a really rich and complicated environment. We can motivate people. There's also all of this work around creativity, but there's lots of future of leadership questions that are entrepreneurial intelligence and entrepreneurial performance related, and AI is not to be feared. It's actually amplifying human potential. We can use it as a tool. So I feel extremely optimistic. I teach entrepreneurship at Stanford Business School, and I wrote a book called The Creator's Code, which is right now the largest data set in the US on high-scale entrepreneurs. So I feel very, very positive looking forward. Okay,
but so Thomas, you are inside of a big German insurance company. A kind of company that
where innovation comes from.
Well, so let's talk about culture. Let's talk about, how do companies step up and help change their culture and help do the kind of reskilling and retraining of their employees that's going to be necessary? How do we first change the mindset in the C-suite, and then how does that trickle down all the way through the company?
Okay, I don't think I have answers to all those questions. I think what I can share with you is just my own personal experiences that I have had throughout my life. So firstly, I agree very much with Paolo and Amy. I think this is a great opportunity for us. And I look at it this way. So we have this great opportunity that's coming at us. It's like a train. We are standing in the middle of the tracks, and we know the train is coming. It's coming, it's going to hit us. So what do we do about it? So if I look at the large corporations and actually try to understand how the digital, how AI, how robotics is actually transforming, is going to transform it. What I see is through the eyes of the people in those corporations. So what does it mean to us as individuals in the corporations? How do we prepare ourselves for this? How do we engage with this that is coming? And what I see is quite a lot of fear. We have fear, we hear about it. We had a lot of panels discussing this since the whole day, and even yesterday evening was the same discussions. And from the corporation perspective is how do we prepare them for this? So there is no fear, so they are positive about it rather than negative. We welcome it with open arms instead of just fearing it. So it comes back to very much cultures, yeah. So I don't want to talk about specifically about the German insurance company, but in general, the companies they are made of people, and people are all about relationships, yeah. That we grow every day and everything. And this change that it's coming, this is almost, from my personal perspective, the largest change since the Industrial Revolution, yeah, which we're experiencing now. And we know what happened in the Industrial Revolution, yeah. We know what happened to people, how people felt, how long they went through. So from my perspective is how do we equip the organizations with the learning agility? Yeah? How do we help them to grow? How do we help them to expand? And I don't mean companies, I mean the people. Yeah? Because I know that it's about the people. And then, yes, you can talk about the layers, you can talk about the C-suite. What do we do with the C-suite? But for me, the C-suite is extremely important. But if I look at the whole corporations and the culture, really, it lies down into the middle management layers. Yeah, this is where the digital or any transformation really has to start from, because if we don't address this, and those folks are not open to the different opportunities or apply the curiosity, the entrepreneurial skills, we're not going to transform those companies, because those people, if we let the fear go, the human spirit just grows and actually releases itself.
So part of that fear comes from ignorance, right? So we talked earlier about the people in the C-suite who actually set the tone for the company. They got to where they were because they were the smartest people in the room, but they no longer are, and they know they're not because they don't understand tech, and they don't. So they have to be the ones that start by asking the questions of the people who are creating AI for them. What does this mean? What's going to be the impact? So how do we get those people to do that, and then have that go to that middle layer of managers?
Well, I think you got to start by, recasting AI as something you can actually understand. We talk about it as if it's this like massively complicated thing that only PhDs in computer science can understand. That's bullshit. Like, AI is not that complicated. In fact, we always talk about it as if it's this amazing mythical thing. We don't even have AI. All we have so far is machine learning, which is like this really cool party trick for computer scientists, and we're getting a lot of mileage out of it, and there's a lot of places to apply it, but it's just one thing. And you guys can all learn how that works. It's not that big of a deal. And what I see is people being so intimidated and scared by this that they're imagining all these worst case scenarios that's going to take over the world. It's not. It's a really useful tool. And that's why we keep saying it's a tool. A hammer is a tool. I can smash your head with it, or I can build you a home. But it's human values question. What do you want to do with that tool? So we have to go back and figure out, what do we actually care about? And you got to get your C-suite to do that. They got to understand this is a tool. Here's what we actually want to do with it. Here's what we care about. And if you get the C-suite to do it, then there's some hope of getting the rest of the organization on board, and then there's some hope of getting the rest of society on board.
So can I jump in here? Yeah. So I feel like a lot of times C-suites don't ask questions, right? Because once you've gained a lot of traction in a company and you're at the top of it, you're supposed to be an expert. So thinking that you're an expert is the Achilles heel. This is really a problem. Entrepreneurs keep asking questions, and in the new modern world of work, the C-suite in large corporations or small companies, the big lever is asking questions and continuing to ask questions. And data provides an amazing ability to do that. And with the hammer analogy, you can really hammer on, are you going in the right direction? Can you do some tests? Can you gather up data? Can you look at it on a daily basis, on a weekly basis? And by the way, can you ask questions of your junior people? We were talking earlier, and I was a mergers and acquisitions banker at one point early in my career, and then I was in the White House when we bailed out the banks in 2008, 9, and 10. I believe that one of the big errors there was that the C-suites across numerous banks didn't grow up in an era of technology where we were bundling risk. This is the subprime loan crisis. There were 30-year-old MIT PhDs bundling risks across lots of different institutions. And the very senior executives had grown up in banks before Excel. I was a banker when we were using Excel. Then it becomes a lot more complicated merger models, different instruments, technology-driven finance. And so if you are very senior in one of those institutions, you really didn't understand what was going on. And the big mistake was you didn't ask questions. So we can learn from that and look back and say, okay, AI, there's a tech advance here. If you're running a business of any variety in any sector and you don't understand what that technology is doing and how to grab the data, help it direct you into the future, pull a much more junior person potentially right up and say, tell me the language you're speaking. You're speaking the language of AI or the language of technology? Help me understand it. Help me explain where this goes. Help me direct my business with this. You know, that's, I think, the real key. It's just keep asking the questions, and don't believe if you are a domain expert that data can't show you the way. Those are very different things, and if you think you have domain expertise, it biases you towards the status quo. If you use data to direct your future, you can figure out a different way to build what tomorrow looks like.
So I would like to build on what Amy just said. So then we take it to our organizations. This is the large corporates, yeah? And I'm not trying to pick up on any corporate. I'm talking in general large corporates. Large corporates, over time, lost the will to innovate, but innovate in a way that people can experiment. Yeah, because when we experiment, we learn. So the corporations forgot that we have to let people fail. We have to let people learn through the experiences, yeah? I mean, one of the biggest things in digital is start anywhere, yeah? Start anywhere and build. And then you end up with control experiments. You have to be controlled, obviously. No one wants to lose billions of euros, pounds, dollars, whatever it is. But it is really let people build an environment, culture, where people can experiment. People can learn. Because at the end of the day, I mean, we talk about the millions of years of evolution. How do we become better and better and better? By learning. And how do we learn? Well, we try something and it doesn't work. We haven't failed. What we have done is we have learned another way how not to do it, so to say. So I think from the corporation's perspective, when you look at the thing that I talked about before, which is the middle management, which I feel is, in my experience, across many industries, is always the same challenge. These are the folks that block it. These are the folks that actually either help us to get through or this will die because of these middle layers, yeah? So it is really to help them to experiment, to learn, to ask questions, to be curious.
And isn't part of the issue that a lot of these big companies think, well, gee, how are we going to out-innovate like Silicon Valley companies or an Amazon or Google? But, and this is something that we discussed earlier, that today these big corporates are sitting on tons of valuable data. And so now, not only can it be cool to work for a big company, those big companies might actually, have a chance to outrun these startups. And we have some examples today of big companies who are starting to do that. So we don't have to say to the big corporations, be like Apple, be like Amazon. We could say, be like this bank or be like this healthcare company. And Amy, I think you have some experience with that.
So I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Ingenuity, and we're advising large Fortune 500s on how to be more entrepreneurial. So with this, I actually think the new frontier is to be a creator inside a corporation. If you really want to know where the sweet spot is, it's in these organizations that can grab a lot of data. It's the first time, I think, in Silicon Valley that we are seeing talent stay at larger companies instead of roll out to become entrepreneurs of their own companies. And the reason is, if you want to solve a really hard problem, you really actually want a lot of information. And if you are a huge healthcare company like Kaiser Permanente, for example, you have a huge amount of data on people's health. If you are a big insurance company, you have a huge amount of information potentially on wearable devices. What are people's health and how would you insure them when you have all the data on how much they sleep and how much they exercise, et cetera? If you're doing a self-driving car, this is a new platform, right? The car is collecting a huge amount of data. So I believe the next frontier, if you want, is rewiring companies and having entrepreneurs or really entrepreneurial talent solve big problems with big data sets. It means that it's very cool to stay at a large organization now. And for many of the big organizations that haven't figured that out yet in the world, you have the ability to capture what talent wants, which is information. And if entrepreneurs want to solve hard problems, you are sitting in a much better seat than Silicon Valley in many cases. So big companies, I think, it's the frontier.
maybe one of the ways to sort of frame this that would make it more accessible to big companies is to understand that, at a fundamental level, what we can do with machine learning is ask a bunch of questions, right? That's all you really get to do. You get to ask questions of your data. That's fundamentally what's going on. And it gives you, in a computational model, it gives you the ability to ask 1,000 questions and to test thousands of different scenarios in software before you ever do it in the real world. So if you're risk averse, what better tool could you hope for than a tool that lets you try everything before you do it? That's what's going on in these simulations, in these models that we build. And so, in a company, sort of recasting the tool or recasting AI as a, risk aversion tool, risk management tool might be a way of helping them get into that asking questions mindset, right?
So the message then is that AI can help companies to reinvent themselves and what they do. It can also help people to reinvent what they are and what they do, right? And but the key to all of this is flexibility, adaptability, and so how do corporations who are taking people who have maybe come up through a rigid education system, who have had drummed into them that the most important thing in life is security, how do you take people who've been formed in that environment and then turn that into entrepreneurial thinking and spirit?
Well, I think we have to basically slay zombie companies. There are a lot of zombie companies out there, and you guys know what I'm talking about. I mean, they're half asleep, right? And employees are clocking in and clocking out, and that's not solving problems for humanity. It's not actually moving the dial forward, but there's a lot of talent sitting there. So, with that in mind, I think you can say to a whole workforce, what's on your mind? What would you like to solve? How do you use this data to direct something you're curious about? And this is in a leadership role. It's really a different kind of a conversation to have with people that are working with you and for you, and across, by the way, an extended network. They don't have to be inside your corporation. This is, life as a search for allies. People are all over the globe that potentially can be your partners. And having AI, back to this question, can save you time. So AI, there are studies that are showing more than half of middle management and even senior management time goes to administrative tasks, scheduling meetings, filing reports, monitoring performance. AI is pretty good at doing that kind of stuff. You use that as a tool, you free up your people to solve more interesting and more creative problems. There's also research showing that AI helps a lot with customer acquisition, customer retention, upselling. If you have more information on who your customer is, you actually serve them a whole lot better. Use the AI to do that, and let the rest of your talent figure out other directions that you want to go in. I mean, it's actually a pretty exciting landscape when you use this as a tool.
So now we come to the question which we already have grappled with this morning. Yeah. So what is this leadership in this age of change on the AI and everything else? And again, I bring it back to the corporate world, so to say. And really, for me, the leadership is about helping people to unleash this opportunity, to understand, firstly, that there is not a scary future. It shuts down lots of doors. Don't get me wrong, it will shut down a lot of doors because I mean, there's a lot of statistics. You can look at any statistics, how many jobs it's going to shut down, how many jobs it's going to create. There will be different jobs. But the one thing that hasn't changed yet is that at the end of the day, there's a human being who's going to do those jobs. And the question really is, we as leaders in that sort of environment, how do we help the people to actually see this as an opportunity, then try to help them to excel at what they're good in this new sort of ecosystem, which will be completely different to the old ecosystem. So instead of pretending it's going to be the same, let's not pretend. Let's say, this is going to be a different ecosystem, and now we have to find our own space. So we have to grow confidence in our folks to actually being confident enough to say, okay, well, this is what it looked like in the past. Look, I'm looking at this opportunity from a completely different perspective, and that's what I can do within this, instead of pretending it would never happen and it would just go away and sort of things.
Well, so that's exactly what I wanted to ask. Is from the panelists' perspective. I mean, sometimes on the outside it feels like we're kind of in frozen mode because, like you said earlier, everyone knows the train is coming, but you don't feel like there's enough movement. I mean, McKinsey came out with a report in November that said up to 375 million of the displaced people will have to change professions by 2030. And you do not see massive scale retraining, reskilling programs being launched all over the world. Everybody seems kind of either ignoring or frozen in time. So how do we get moving? Because time is short.
Okay, so not everyone is frozen in time. I'm going to challenge that back. So Amazon's not frozen in time. Facebook, Google, a lot of the companies that are, inhabiting the world that I live in Silicon Valley are jumping ahead on this. And it's little tiny tests, right? It's using data every single day. You can really test if you have a good idea or you don't, because you can get more feedback. It's much faster, right? So you can use AI as your wingman, right? So one of the skills that comes out of my research is to fly an OODA loop. It stands for observe, orient, decide, act. Entrepreneurial people observe, orient, decide, act much faster. They fly a much faster loop. And if you use data and you have AI helping you as your ally there, as your wingman, you are learning faster and you're getting ahead faster.
A great example.
And it's not that scary. It's just something to do as sort of a behavior or a habit.
A big part of that culture comes from the fact that, we make software. And with software, you get that kind of rapid iteration for free, and it gets you in that rapid iteration mindset. And when we first started making software back in the 80s, we would spend 18 months writing software, put it on a floppy disk in a shrink-wrapped box. Okay, sorry. I don't know. We don't do that in Silicon Valley. We dream some shit up, roll out of bed, write some code, launch it at lunchtime.
Yeah.
That's your web apps. That's your mobile apps. I'm launching 3, 4, 5, 6 versions a day of those apps, steering towards. You don't have to be so smart. You got to be smart to guess a year or two in advance what the market wants. Kids in Silicon Valley can be dumb shits because all they got to do is A/B test their way to success. That's right. And when you start with that mindset and you build a big company with that mindset, then you're not planning on being in the same business next year that you are today. And that's why they steer so nimbly.
So for me, the real question is how to take this type of entrepreneurship, which we'll talk about, and how do we bring to this. And okay, I'm going to exclude the Amazons and the Facebooks and
all the guys who are good
all the guys who sort of run faster.
Yeah.
But at the same time, how do we take that and how do we crack that nut and bring it to corporations, which may be not Amazons of this world, maybe not Facebooks, but they have ambition to get there, And because we all seen, I think everyone in the audience and ourselves, we've seen where big companies go and buy those startups. And the next day, what happens? The startups die. Why do they die? So why do they die? You cannot absorb them because the culture clash is like a body, human body. Human body rejects organism. If you implant the liver or you implant something, whatever is implanted, it suddenly rejects it a lot of times. So you have to feed with some sort of tablets and medicines and stuff. So the question is, how you recreate the ecosystem? And this comes back to the culture. It comes to the leadership within the corporations. And I think this where we have to learn a lot, we have to experiment a lot, and again, it comes back to learning agility. How do we learn? How are we going to do this? And we're open for the outcomes that may completely surprise us.
Well, where I come from, we describe this by saying, any large-scale, successful organization or entity could be a business, could be an industry, could be healthcare, could be education or religion, whatever. Part of what you evolve is an immune system, right? And the job of the immune system is to reduce risk. And if anything looks like risk, it's change. And so what we do is kill anything that could be, the future of the company. We kill the next technology. We kill the change. We kill that risk. And that's what they're built for. Companies are built to do whatever they did last year, a little better, a little faster, a little cheaper. And you got to start by changing your mind about that. And I think actually another biological analogy is, we try to engineer everything to be perfect and work exactly as designed. That's not how you and I were made. We're like 99% error correction. Cells are dying off all the time. And it just kind of sort of works, but we're very resilient biological entities. I think that, companies of the future need to learn from that. Computers of the future need to learn from that. Right now we're like 1% error correction. It's not enough.
So I'll make a comment here. I think traditional legacy institutions or big companies, they often drive for consensus, right? So everybody wants to have buy-in on a decision. Startups, entrepreneurial ventures, there's a huge amount of conflict, right? And people view business as an intellectual debate. They come with a point of view. They tell you what they think. And if it makes you uncomfortable, it doesn't matter, right? And so I think if you're trying to rewire traditional organizations, you have to up the tolerance for conflict. You have to actually reward people who will tell you you're wrong.
Yeah.
You have to, when people experiment and when they come up short, something doesn't work, you have to actually say, good job. That was terrific, right? Because more people will do more of it. And so that's one of the big things is, promote a little more conflict inside your organizations with respect. You have to respect people, but you have to promote the idea that they will come with a point of view and surprise you. And look for the counterintuitive truths. Look for somebody who will tell you something you never thought of, because that will often lead you down towards a future pathway.
So if I can just build on that. So we talk a lot about diversity in organizations, yeah? But there's diversity of thought, yeah? Which we need to support diversity of thoughts, diversity of opinions, cultivated, as Emmy was saying. And I think that's another diversity that we don't think about today. Yeah, we talk about lots of different diversities, but there is yet another diversity we have to add to the list and say, guys, how many different opinions did we get today? I remember in organizations we try to innovate, and I'm sure everyone have seen many times. We try to do lots of things. We try to say, okay, we put in your KPIs. You have to have 3 innovations this year, and we pay you some performance bonus. But that for me is you cannot stimulate it, yeah, because if we have a culture that actually doesn't help to have a different opinion, it doesn't support that confrontation. In English language is an interesting language because confrontation in English language is a negative word. Yeah? But from my perspective, it's not negative at all. It has so many different positive characteristics that we just completely avoid today.
If you have KPIs, you're dead. Because, I'm not kidding, because it means you're setting a goal and the only thing you can do is whatever you did before to get there. There's no reward for trying something else. Am I wrong about that? In my business, I'll tell you, I'm an invention business. In invention, you're wrong almost all the time. My business, we aim for a batting average of 1. That means I have to be wrong 999 times before I get a hit. I have the worst business in the world by your standards, right? The record industry gets better hits than me, right? But when I get a hit, I get a big hit, and it pays for all the failures. I'm planning on being wrong every day for 3 years. And that works, right? Just try to put me out of business. Sorry.
How would that play out in your current company?
Look, again, it is all about learning curve, yeah? And every company is on a different point in the learning curve. We are at our own point in learning curve. And then really depends on how you go about it. I mean, a lot of companies just do those things called lighthouses or speedboats, do them on parameters, and hopefully they can inject into the core of the business, the heart of the business itself. Now, it sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't work. I think it depends on the size of the challenge in the core. So the question is, how do we do other things? Yeah? How do we use all of that we just talk about here? Yeah? How do we help to let people experiment? I always come to the same thing for me, and I apologize for that. But really, it comes back to how do we train and educate and lead our middle management to let people do this? Yeah. So and then I guess comes. I mean, we all come. I actually agree with the statement that you made this morning. I mean, is that we're learning entire lives. Yeah, and I think you said we're 99% error and 1% right. Sometimes I think I'm 99.99% error and point whatever right. But the thing for me is that how do we educate ourselves through that? How do we educate ourselves not just within the corporations? How do we educate ourselves as a society? Regardless which country on the planet, how do we educate ourselves as a society? Because we as a society also need to be prepared for this, yeah? Because this is much bigger challenge that my corporation that I work for today, or industry that I work in, or other industries. This is really how do we prepare ourselves for this sort of thing, the next industrial revolution. I mean, that is the question for me, and it is very philosophical and existential, but it's a really important one.
So I think that we've had linear approaches to education and to business. If you look at the way we've trained students, whether it's in the US or Europe, we've taught people there's one right answer. You can have a 4-point grade average, you can have a perfect A level, you can have a perfect SAT score. We've basically done that in business. We've taken risk out of a system. Some of the German engineering companies are extremely good at that and scaled globally. But in a more entrepreneurial economy, here's the thing. There's not one right answer. And instead of learning the equation and mastering it, entrepreneurs create the next equation. So if you're going to go into the world in a more entrepreneurial setting, you have to keep asking the questions and keep realizing that you're going to be wrong some of the time, but you will invent the next equation, right? You will invent the next product. You will come up with an answer that our education system has never even thought of as something that the world actually needs. So it's the keep asking questions.
I think I've got the answer to all of this.
Oh, good.
Okay. When 100 years ago, with the Industrial Revolution, right? What basically, for the first time in human history, everybody got some free time, right? But we didn't squander it. We were very industrious, and we invented the entertainment industry, right? That didn't exist before. That's all new. Books, movies, music, elections, video games, all the things we do to fill our free time, right? We're about to give you a bunch more free time, right? So this time, instead of just watching more Netflix, how about if we get you helping with teaching kids, right? My kid's in school with 30 other kids and one teacher, and we bitch about classroom overcrowding all the time.
Actually,
I would trade any of her teachers for a displaced truck driver and a 1-to-1 student-teacher ratio, right? You don't even need a good teacher if you only have one student. I'm not kidding. This is a human values problem. We've deployed people to do all the wrong things. We've deployed them driving trucks. We don't need that. We need to deploy them to do what they're good at, which is teach those kids how to be awesome.
So, to end up, I think, to wrap up, I think, because we're out of time, you know, the message here is we need to be more curious. We need to ask questions. And both corporations and people need to embrace change. And let's take this extra time as a gift and do something really awesome with it. And so with that, I'd like to ask for a big hand for
Thank you.